For the millions of people following the O.J. Simpson trial, Week 8 begins like many others. The prosecution calls a detective to the stand. But by week's end, the trial and this country are forever changed by what happens in that courtroom. The witness, Detective Mark Fuhrman. I'm Roger Cossack, and this is OJ25.
All right, the people may call their next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The people call Detective Mark Fuhrman.
All right, Detective Fuhrman.
The truth and whole truth, connected. Please still help you God.
I do.
Please have a seat in the witness stand.
Mark Fuhrman, M-A-R-K-F-U-H-R-M-A-N.
Detective Fuhrman, can you tell us how you feel about testifying today?
Nervous? Reluctant?
Can you tell us why?
Throughout, since June 13th, it seems that I've seen a lot of the evidence ignored and a lot of personal issues come to the forefront. I think that's too bad.
Have you gone over your testimony in the presence of several district attorneys in order to prepare yourself for court and the allegations that you may hear from the defense?
Yes.
And in the course of that particular examination, sir, was the topic of your testimony concerning the work you did in this case, the actual visitation to Bundy and Rockingham, was that discussed?
No.
Did you receive a call at some point that night?
Yes,
after
I
you
did.
went to bed?
Excuse me. Yes, I did.
And what time did you get that call?
1:05 in the morning.
It's my boss, Ron Phillips, and he said, I've got 2 down, and I want you to handle it.
The north-south alleyway directly behind the residence had been blocked off with policemen at both locations to make sure nobody entered the crime scene from either direction.
Okay. So was there anyone moving around inside the crime scene tape when you got there?
No.
What were you able to see from your vantage point where the arrow is shown?
We could see a female victim in a black dress.
With no purse on her. Her throat is cut, but we didn't know that. She's lying in a pool of blood. We couldn't see her face. Her hair is drenched with blood. We did not truly know who she was.
Well, Officer Risky used his flashlight to point out several items.
And what did he point out to you, sir?
He pointed out the male victim, the long leaves at the feet of the male victim. He pointed his flashlight and said that there was a knit cap and a glove there also.
There was kind of a not a crisp read of the scene initially. You had to be able to put a few things together first. Who was the guy? You know, how did she end up here? Why didn't she have any shoes on?
Tell us what else you see in this photograph.
I see shoe prints that appear to be dark and imprinted in what I believe to be blood that morning.
So you looked at this and there was drops of blood, there was shoe prints leading away from the female, so the conclusion was at least 3 people were involved in this crime. We have 2 victims and we have somebody that left, whether that was a victim or a suspect.
Detective Phillips and Officer Risky walked back out onto Dorothy, and I re-entered the house to start catching up on the notes from what had been shown to me so far and what I have observed.
And so what is the closest that you got to the bodies of Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown at that time, 2 a.m. in the morning?
Standing above them on the top of the landing.
Now, at some point, did you leave the location of 875 South Bundy?
Yes, we did. Well, I asked Officer Risky, I said, do you know the numbers for the Rockingham location?
And did he respond to you?
He said 360 north. Then I asked Officer Risky, what's the last major street before you get there? And he responded, Cliffwood, but look real quick because you're going to miss it if you go around the corner too quick. All four of us exited the vehicle and stood around the Ashford gate. And I can't remember if it was Van Adder or Lang started ringing the buzzer at the gate.
You have three men that are standing at one doorbell, ringing it at a gate, a big gate, time and time again with no answer. It was killing me. I walked away like I don't want to be seen being part of this. This is too silly.
I was just strolling along, looking at the house. Maybe I could see some movement inside.
So I'm walking down the street, and there's a white Bronco. And it just seemed like it was parked wrong.
Lon Cryer, a juror in the Simpson trial, keeps detailed notes, over 600 pages in all, chronicling everything he sees and hears in the courtroom. In the 25 years since the trial, he has never looked at the notes, until now.
Investigating detectives makes a decision regarding the recovery of evidence from the scene.
So you walked down Rockingham, and what did you do then?
Well, I was walking straight forward towards this white Bronco that was parked.
Claims he determined that the Bronco was hastily parked upon his arrival at the Rockingham residence based on the fact that it was the only vehicle on the street at the time and appeared to be jettied out in the rear as if someone had hurriedly parked and gotten out of the vehicle.
To me, it looked parked a little unusual for that type of parking.
After walking away back toward Ashford, Fuhrman called him back to Bronco to point out that blood-like spots above door handle on driver's side door of Bronco.
As I'm looking on the door, I see some little specks, some streaks of red that looks like blood.
While I'm reading it, I'm starting to realize how much the Bronco really meant as far as for whether they found blood or not in it. There was always some problems as far as for certain blood samples from that vehicle not being removed from the vehicle till weeks after it had went into the impound. So this is interesting. He's referring to the situation as the Bronco was still right there at the curve.
You were the most junior detective, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And were you in the best physical shape of the four detectives there?
Well, I don't. Kind of put me on the spot, but I think I was the tallest detective.
Okay.
I jumped the wall just to the left or east of the Ashford gate, landed on the other side, came around and released the hydraulic arm to the gate on Ashford and let the other detectives into the location.
Van Adder and Lang pretty much just went in, and nobody answered the door at the main residence, and eventually they got at the pool bungalows, Cato Kalin to answer his door. Cato Kalin's a character. They talked to Cato Kalin for a brief minute, and all three of them go down to the last bungalow when Cato said, well, Arnell, OJ's daughter, is down at the last bungalow, so they all rushed down there. So I'm left with Cato, so okay, I'll ask Cato some questions.
I believe one of the first things I asked him was, do you mind if I look around? He replied, no. I think I asked him another question.
And what was that?
If anything unusual happened last night.
He says, well, there was an earthquake last night.
So why can you get away with getting up on the stand and saying something like that then?
Because you hadn't been cross-examined yet, and I don't interrupt.
As you were looking then at the outside of the residence, you were trying to determine what wall matched up with the outside of Cato's room?
Yes.
But I said, well, what do you mean? He goes, well, I was talking to my girlfriend, and he gave a certain time, And all of a sudden, there was this big rumbling crash on my wall, and the picture actually shook right above my head. So I said, okay, and I knew full well there was not an earthquake the previous night.
Then after you passed through the second gate area, you saw the wall that appeared to match Cato's wall.
Yes.
Then what happened?
I continued walking down the path, and when I got approximately 15 or 20 feet away, I saw a dark object. I continued to walk forward towards that object. At some point, I could tell that it was a glove.
As I got closer, I shined my flashlight on it, and I could see it was clearly a glove, and it looked damp. I also noted that it looked very similar to the glove at Bundy. I at some point talked to Detective Van Adder and Lang, and I took Detective Van Adder back to the location. I'll never forget what Van Adder said. He goes, this is a crime scene. Yeah, like it wasn't before, and we've got possible blood on a Bronco, and I said, that's why we're here.
So at the time that you found the glove, you still did not know where he was or where he'd gone or when he'd gone there?
No.
After you went out into the rear driveway and attempted to examine the alley for blood, what did you do next?
Well, we were walking, and I was trying to take mental notes.
What I remember the most about Mark Fuhrman was he was really confident. He seemed very assured and almost cocky.
Can you tell us whether you knew someone or met someone by the name of Kathleen Bell?
Yes, I can tell you. I did not.
At the center of the defense case was this argument that O.J. Simpson was framed by Mark Fuhrman, by Phil Van Adder, that there was a cover-up, and that was spurred by racism on the part of these police officers.
But you do recognize the name, don't you, sir?
Yes.
Well, they had some witnesses that were coming forward. A female that was trying to, I think she was trying to flirt with me, and I really wanted nothing to do with her. I didn't recall our conversation, but she said that I made some racial comments.
And how was it that you heard her name? In connection with what?
In connection with allegations of statements I made to her at a date sometime in 85 or 86.
Were you informed about a letter she had written in July of 1994 after the preliminary hearing to Johnny Cochran?
Yes, I did.
Did the conversation Kathleen Bell describes in this letter occur?
No, it did not.
The letter from Kathleen Bell says she meets Fuhrman in 1985 or 86. She says during their conversation, he tells her that he wants to kill black people and that interracial couples disgust him.
I could see the writing on the wall, and it was fairly obvious from the onset that they could not actually challenge the evidence.
All right, Detective Fuhrman, could we ask you to step outside, please? Thank you.
Fuhrman's global attitudes toward race specifically, and in particular, couples that are racially mixed, such as Mr. Simpson and Nicole, is fair game for questioning, inasmuch as he is very definitively a suspect for having carried that glove from Bundy, where he found it, to Rockingham, where he deposited it. We intend to show in incident after incident that Detective Fuhrman was willing to violate the law and the federal civil rights statute to unfairly prosecute black men who he found in the company of white women, and that this pattern was consistent right up until shortly before this incident. In the extraordinary set of circumstances where the prosecution felt compelled to acquaint the jury with the fact that this witness required special training so he could control himself on the witness stand, we're entitled to show why that special training was and always will be necessary in his case.
This is the letter Kathleen Bell sends to the defense. She says, quote, Mr. Fuhrman may be more racist than you could ever imagine, end quote. She says Fuhrman told her he would look for a reason to pull over black men driving with white women, and that he would like to see all black people gathered together and killed. She also says Fuhrman repeatedly uses the N-word when talking about black people.
I mean, is that where this case is going? How far afield do we have to go on this witness? I mean, we have gone way out there in the past 10 years. Have you ever used a racial slur? And a woman who makes allegations about him 10 years ago, and what other cases he's ever testified in. And I mean, we have really hit the outer limits here, and this is far beyond the outer limits. This is the twilight zone. This letter really has no bearing on this detective's credibility, Your Honor.
His offer that it was a crime against nature for a black man to be with a white woman should in and of itself be enough to allow cross-examination on his racial bias.
In the course of attempting to obtain a stress disability, he described stresses in the field. He had worked gangs, and he had used derogatory terms toward, I think, Latinos as well as African Americans, and this was part of his case to stress off of LAPD, which was something, unfortunately, at the time was fairly common. That request was denied. So we basically looked at it very clinically and we certainly felt we were prepared to deal with that aspect of Mark Fuhrman's background.
They will never be able to give this court an offer of proof. They haven't to this date. When the people have requested that they do so, give us an offer of proof. Show us how you're going to prove that this detective planted this evidence. They have not once been able to do so.
I'm not defending Mark Fuhrman, you know, but I never, ever believed that he would do something like that.
Initially, we supported him. When he was getting slapped around before any of this other stuff came out, I said, Mark, I'm going to sit in the first row every day you're on the stand. We're on your side. Well, once he gets caught with his pants down around his ankles and he's pointing in every direction with his own, all that changes.
These allegations get more outrageous by the minute. And I'm stricken again by the preposterousness of the claims of the defense.
Well, I was disappointed we lost the case.
Sure. Did it go a little further than that, Detective Fuhrman?
No, not at all.
Weren't you a little bit angry that you were being shoved out
No.
of a murder in your own territory?
No.
Didn't bother you a bit?
None.
F. Lee Bailey cross-examining Mark Fuhrman. That was a really iconic moment. You have to remember, defense attorneys, especially those who are high profile, who do these high profile trials, there is some amount of performance that's needed. It's a little bit different than the way prosecutors usually present evidence and present their case.
Detective Phillips, give us his exact order to you that accompanied the notice that you were out. What was the order?
Robbery homicide's taken the case.
Yeah. Did he say, Mark, don't do any more work on this case?
No, I understood that.
When you walked down to the Bronco, did you ask permission from Lieutenant Van Adder before you did that?
Detective Van Adder? No.
I'm sorry, Detective Van Adder. Detective Phillips?
No.
Detective Lang?
No.
This was on your own initiative?
Yes.
You weren't just being nosy, were you?
I don't think nosy. I was walking and I noticed something on the Bronco and I continued walking towards it.
Did you wipe a glove in the Bronco, Detective Fuhrman?
No.
You did not?
No.
Have you ever testified that there was blood in the Bronco?
I'm not sure if we testified to that in the prelim or not. From the statement he made, the crashing sound and the time that he heard it, combined with the blood in the Bronco, the way I was feeling is there's a possibility there could be another victim.
I said I couldn't see inside the car really well, just the back. There's a shovel and some plastic. because the tint was reflecting back my flashlight. So now you had natural light, and he cups his hands and looks in, and he goes, "There's blood all over the inside."
You then walked out the front door.
Yes.
You had no direction from anyone to do that, did you?
No, I didn't.
This, again, was Detective Fuhrman on his own, was it not?
Yes.
You had an idea that you would like to check out Cato's claim that some unusual noise had occurred at about 11:15 that night on the outside of the wall of Cato Kalin's room.
That's correct.
Now, if that glove had been there where you say you found it, it would have been placed there by someone involved in the homicide. Isn't that conclusion compelled?
I would assume that, yes.
That would be a vicious killer of some sort, would it not?
Yes.
And you hung around for 15 minutes with no backup and no vest doing something. Is that correct?
No, it isn't.
Has anyone, to your knowledge, seen that glove there before your arrival?
Not to my knowledge.
Would you think it important that if the glove were in that location, the likelihood was that someone had placed it there who had been at Bundy?
Yes.
Did you think that whoever had dropped that glove might have left footprints?
I did not see any evidence of that, no.
Did you then cause 18 pairs of feet to trample that area before any criminals could get to it?
18 pairs
18 pairs of feet. 2 Fuhrman, 4 Fuhrman and Phillips, 4 Fuhrman and Van Adder, 4 Fuhrman and Lang, and 4 Fuhrman and Rokar. Did you do that?
Yes, sir.
There was really no thought about anything about the glove. It looked like the glove at Bundy. There was nothing that indicated anything how it was there, if it was thrown there, dropped there. The ground had leaves. There was no way to say if there was a shoe print. There was no other evidence. It looked fresh. There was no debris on top of it. There was no giant conclusions other than it looks like the glove at Bundy.
Did you believe that you would be an essential witness if you were the first to find an important piece of evidence?
Well, I couldn't make that determination at that time, sir. I didn't even know what the implication of the glove was.
Well, you told us the minute you saw it, you thought it looked like the one on Bundy, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
All
I
right.
thought it looked like.
Now, you're a trained detective. Tell the court, if you can, why the presence of the other murder glove from Bundy made you think that you were about to encounter a victim, Detective Fuhrman.
Because I didn't have anything to believe that there was a suspect there other than the bloody glove.
People talk about Fuhrman being one of the investigators. I suppose you could say that initially, but the reality was he was in and out on day one. He had nothing to do with this case after the first day, until the defense found out about him and used him as their foil.
Is that the sum total of the observations you made on that little excursion? How about a couple of gloves, Detective?
Excuse me?
Did you see a couple of gloves up there?
No, I saw one glove.
There's a problem that's been brought to your attention, isn't there, Detective Fuhrman?
No.
When discussing this event in the preliminary hearing and talking about the glove, his tongue slipped and you said them, didn't you?
Yes.
From that vantage point, you first observed the glove that you told us about?
Not first, no.
When did you first observe it?
There's a iron fence, and through that iron fence you can get very close to the male victim. And looking there, I could see them down at his feet.
Not only the planting of evidence, a glove at Rockingham is absurd, and I take affront to the point where I took 2 polygraphs. The idea was F. Lee Bailey would apologize to me for saying I planted evidence if I took a polygraph from his guy. Okay? I did that one on TV. And he said, you passed at the highest level I've ever seen anybody pass this polygraph. 1, I'm waiting for my apology. 2, I think it is such a disgrace that intelligent people with a doctorate in law would actually put the country and the legal system through such a charade for nothing more than their own ego to say, I won.
As week 8 unfolds with the prosecution's star witness, Detective Mark Fuhrman, the defense is biding its time. They'd made no secret of their plan to attack Fuhrman as a racist who planted evidence. But the fury and thunder of legal legend F. Lee Bailey and his cross-examination of Fuhrman raises the bar on how to trap a witness in a lie.
There are some issues we need to resolve before he gets the witness stand in front of the jury.
How many total times have you met with either Mr. Darden, Ms. Clark, or anyone else in the prosecution team in connection with your testimony?
7 or 8 times.
7 or 8. Beginning when and ending when?
There'll be various times this year.
Do you represent to this court and jury that 3 lawyers asked you a total of 10 questions in this session?
Yes.
Do you know any lawyer on this earth who is capable of asking only 3 questions?
Not currently.
Touche. Now, do you have any memory of even one of these 10 questions?
No.
Not a single one?
No, sir.
And this happened when, Detective Fuhrman?
I believe it was 2 or 3 weeks ago.
2 or 3 weeks ago?
Yes.
Well, now you have been exhibiting a startling memory for detail of a crime that was 8 months ago, have you not?
Sustained.
Many people don't understand how lonely it was sitting up there knowing what was about to come.
It's questionable whether it was necessary for Mark Fuhrman to testify. Prosecution said they had to introduce him, they had to bring him on because he found the glove behind Cato Kalin's room on the Rockingham estate. But many experts in trial law say that the person who collected the evidence could have testified, that other people could have testified. So obviously, in hindsight, it was a really bad choice.
Tell us, please, what it was you offered these lawyers in that room about your vocabulary, Detective Fuhrman.
F. Lee Bailey's cross-examination of Mark Fuhrman was very dramatic. It was kind of like out of a movie. And it was a big moment in the courtroom because we knew that it was pivotal. Like the way that F. Lee Bailey was setting him up just seemed so like such a classic trap. And it was almost hard to believe, like, is he really just gonna walk into this trap like that? But he did.
I don't use any type of language to describe people of any race, such as what is alleged by Kathleen Bell.
I also became a little angry and a little stubborn, and it's almost like F. Lee Bailey and I were there all by ourselves.
Right now, F. Lee Bailey has Mark Fuhrman right where he wants him, and watch what happens next. F. Lee Bailey uses that offensive word time after time after time, and he's doing it because every time F. Lee Bailey says it, Mark Fuhrman might as well be saying it. The jury is looking at him, and he is building Mark Fuhrman into being a racist by using that word over and over.
Did you tell the lawyers in that room that you never used the word?
Overruled.
It was never asked.
I'm asking, do you?
So what?
That's vague. Rephrase the question.
Do you use the word in describing people?
Presently.
Yeah.
Overruled.
No, sir.
Have you used that word in the past 10 years?
Not that I recall, no.
When F. Lee Bailey asked him if he had ever used the N-word in the previous 10 years, he was very, very definitive in saying that he had not, which was surprising to us in the media. We thought he would give himself a little wiggle room.
If he had said, yeah, of course I've said that. Am I ashamed of it? Sure. I was stupid, whatever he could have said. But he said, no, I've never used that word in my life. And nobody believed him.
I'm not sure I can answer that question the way you phrased it, sir.
The second that they didn't believe him on that issue, then there's a question, gee, if he's a racist, do you think he planted the evidence?
You know, just because there was a racist cop on there, it shouldn't be the reason why you would consider it. But of course, he was very prominent and he played a very prominent role in the investigation itself. And so to know that he had a certain prejudice or bias against the defendant right at that point. It just didn't bode well with me and how I looked at things at that point.
The defense's strategy is incompetence, racism, planning of evidence. It doesn't disprove guilt. Prove that I can't write search warrants, that I don't know how to do my job, that I don't understand chains of custody, rules of evidence, that I don't understand the Fourth Amendment. Then you may have an argument.
When Bailey used the N-word, I know that he wants to sensationalize his presentation.
The first time I dumped that word on him, he knew it was coming.
He has lied to this court. He's impeached by his own witness.
And I ask that you put a stop to it. Either put
Bailey.
Cordoba on the
Excuse
stand
me, Mr.
or
Bailey.
stop her from testifying.
Stand up and speak when it's your turn.
You mean if you called someone a you have forgotten it?
Every time the courtroom was electrified, every time the word was used, I got a lot of criticism for it in the press because in their trial wisdom, they thought I should have softened it up a bit. Well, that ain't the way the game is played.
I'm not sure I can answer that question the way you phrased it, sir.
You have difficulty understanding the question. I'll rephrase it.
Bailey knew what the answers were, and he had the evidence to back it up. So it was almost like he was toying with Fuhrman because he knew he had Fuhrman trapped.
And you say on your oath that you have not addressed any black person as a or spoken about black people as in the past 10 years, Detective Fuhrman.
That's what I'm saying, sir.
So that anyone who comes to this court and quotes you as using that word in dealing with African Americans would be a liar, would they not, Detective Fuhrman?
Yes, they would.
All of them, correct?
All of them.
All right, thank you.
I do believe that by him using it as often as he did, for me, it was like, oh, well, yeah, he's kind of grandstanding with using the word itself. It was pretty riveting, I'll say that for sure, especially in the context of in the courtroom like that. Again, it's a word that I heard often growing up as a kid, probably, but it was different to hear it in a courtroom environment where we were trying to decide a person's guilt of it or innocence at that point.
When I said to Fuhrman, anyone who comes into this courtroom and says you used that bad word would be a liar, is that correct? And he hesitated and he said yes. And I looked at him incredulously and I said, all of them? Which tipped him to the fact I had an army outside the courtroom door. And the mistake he made was, yes, all of them.
It's an unquestioned statement that if we insert it, then all else is wrong. Then everything gets thrown out the window. So when you talk about race, the Simpson trial, Judge Ito really failed not only himself, he failed everything that he did before and everything he did after, because this is the only case anybody knew about. When he allowed the question, he eliminated the possibility of justice.
He not only made himself look bad, he made the police department look bad. He made all of law enforcement look bad. It was an embarrassment to testify in open court in front of 50 million people or more on live television.
They couldn't understand how a respected police officer planted a glove. I mean, who would do something like that? Because that's not their experience, you know? And the legacy, unfortunately, in the African-American community is that happens every day.
The fact that the officers did what they did in that case, I wasn't surprised about it at all. Because again, I was already aware by being a member of the African-American community myself that there are people that have very negative encounters with the police.
And under what circumstances have you seen him?
I've seen him in the DA's office.
Mark Fuhrman was intelligent, good-looking, articulate police officer who presented himself as being able to assess what was happening in this case, presenting evidence in this case in a way that was rational and thoughtful. That's how he first came off.
And you say on your oath that you have not addressed any black person as a or spoken about black people as in the past 10 years, Detective Fuhrman.
That's what I'm saying, sir.
As the trial went on and as we learned more information about Fuhrman, that veneer kind of came off. F. Lee Bailey destroyed Mark Fuhrman on the stand. You know, he did more than back him in the corner. He backed him into a corner and then, like, crushed him.
There was discussion and somewhat of meeting of minds and hoping that we could prepare me for cross-examination. I don't think it achieved those goals.
But you said, Detective Fuhrman, that your concerns had nothing to do with the crime scene or the murder. They were something else.
Yes.
All right. What were the concerns, Detective Fuhrman?
Well, there's been numerous motions to bring in irrelevant evidence into this trial.
Irrelevant evidence?
Yes, sir.
Such as? Detective Fuhrman, what events did you have in mind when you spoke of irrelevant occurrences that you feared might be brought into court?
Kathleen Bell.
All right. And you say that that's irrelevant?
Yes.
He's a very arrogant individual. He's very self-absorbed.
Bailey has a way of putting it out there that sounded so strong, and Fuhrman just went right along with it.
It was just another knife to pull. It was another excuse, another arrow in the quiver that they could pull when somebody is guilty as sin. They can pull the race card, and then somehow you're 50% home.
Not only did these alleged incidents never occur, but the purpose for which they're being admitted could never have occurred. And Max Cordoba gave us a statement that says none of that.
Cordoba says, "Hey, Rohr, your boy is here." And Fuhrman turns on Cordoba and says, "Let's get something straight. The only boy here is you." And then Cordoba leaves the building, and Fuhrman follows him out into the parking lot and repeats the same epithet.
We've interviewed Max Cordoba long time ago. He never made such a statement. And he never alleged that Mark Fuhrman ever made such a statement.
Max Cordoba wanted to tell Mr. Darden and Miss Lewis about this incident, and they shut him off. And that's what he will testify to. And, Your Honor, I have spoken with him on the phone personally, Marine to Marine. I haven't the slightest doubt that he'll march up to that witness stand and tell the world what Fuhrman called him on no provocation whatsoever.
Ms. Clark.
You know, Your Honor, all we're getting here is a lot of very dramatic posturing. Because when these witnesses take the witness stand, if they ever do, the court is going to see a very different story than what Mr. Bailey has laid out for the court today. You can rest assured, I want this film clip saved forever, because this is going to be very funny.
I have spoken with him on the phone personally, Marine to Marine.
No, I have not talked to F. Lee Bailey.
Never talked to him?
No.
You know who F. Lee Bailey is?
Yes.
Pretty distinct fellow.
Yeah.
Pretty distinct voice.
Correct.
So you haven't talked Marine to Marine to F. Lee Bailey?
No.
It's very clear what he said to the court and what he was intending to convey.
I do not appreciate being called a liar in any court.
He was intending to convey to the court that he had personal knowledge of what this man said because this man said it to him personally, Marine to Marine.
And I will ask at the proper time for correct action to be taken.
And then they have, well, this means this, and oh no, that means that. I feel like we're in Alice in Wonderland. We've got Jabberwocky here.
The proper way to proceed, if there was any claim of misleading the court, would be to put the witness on the witness stand under oath.
I think that Mr. Bailey should be cited for contempt and fined substantially.
What they eliminated from the tape that I saw on NBC News this morning was that Stone Phillips said, "Why didn't you mention these things before?" He said, "I only give very narrow answers to every question."
He has lied to this court. He is impeached by his own witness.
I ask that you put a stop to it. Either put Cordoba on the stand
Excuse me, Mr.
or
Bailey.
stop her from testifying.
Stand up and speak when it's your turn.
You're being penalized at this point merely under the procedure of the California Evidence Code. which says prior inconsistent statements can be offered in one of two ways. Either the witness is confronted or the witness is still available to be cross-examined. And that's how we're going to do it. Thank you, sir.
All right, no doubt objection, please.
Noted. I think it would be appropriate to begin this session by both sides acknowledging going beyond the bounds of professional conduct.
I do extend to Mr. Bailey my apology for the extreme nature of the exchange yesterday. I don't anticipate that happening again. And I think that we will all, from this day forward, conduct ourselves as the professionals, seasoned professionals that we all are.
Mr. Bailey?
I, without hesitation, apologize for what I have found as an unwarranted comment directed at Ms. Clark, and that was that her eyesight and memory were deficient. Very plainly, that was unfair since her eyesight is excellent and her memory has proven to be the same.
Detective Fuhrman, did you know whether any fibers from the Bronco would be found on that glove that you ultimately found at Rockingham?
No.
And did you know the cause of death?
No.
I have nothing further.
She gave up. You've got to do some redirect. You can't just let me be butchered by the defense.
All right, Detective Fuhrman, I'm going to release you from further testimony today. However, you are still subject to recall. You are ordered not to discuss your testimony with anybody except your own attorney and the attorneys from both sides or their investigators. Do you understand the order, sir?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, thank you very much. Your excuse, sir.
Thank you.
I just said it can't be this screwed up. It can't be. This is like, I mean, introducing race into this would be like introducing sexual preference into a motive. I mean, it really has nothing to do with anything. I was put in a position that many say I deserved. And to me, I thought about one thing when I was sitting there, and I go, you dumb son of a bitch, you should have never done a good job. You should have never answered that phone.
All right. Detective, part of the court's order is you agree to return within 72 hours of being notified. Do you understand the order?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. And you'll give the court plenty of notice?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Week 8 of the O.J. Simpson trial ends with Detective Mark Fuhrman stepping out of the witness box and into history. The impact of his testimony still reverberating today. Coming up, Cato Kalin, O.J. Simpson's offbeat house guest, brings a drastic mood change to the courtroom. That's next on OJ25. I'm Roger Cossack.